Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's web seminar, Common Challenges in Scaling Enterprise Test Automation, sponsored by Kobiton and featuring our speakers, Crystal Escalante, Ryan Silvera, and Mason Dula, who are all with GreenSky. I'm your moderator today, Beth Romanek. Thanks for joining us. Before I hand it over to our speakers, let me explain this console you see in front of you. All three panels on your screen can be moved around and resized. If you have any technical issues, please let us know by typing in the questions and answers panel on the left. This is, of course, also how you can submit questions. There will be a Q&A session at the end, so feel free to ask questions throughout this presentation. And finally, for your best viewing experience, please close any unnecessary applications you have running in the background. This web seminar is being recorded and it will be made available to watch on demand. Once the recording is ready, you'll get an email later today with instructions about how you can watch the presentation. And with that, I would like to hand it over to our speakers.
Hi, good afternoon. We wanted to start off by just kind of explaining a little bit about what GreenSky, who we are and what we do. So GreenSky's, we provide a financial technology service to a lot of merchants. We also do a few consumer loans. But the whole idea behind GreenSky and what we were founded on is the idea that a payment, credit, and commerce could be enhanced using technology and elegant user experiences. We believe that payment and credit card could be an asset that empowers and enables commerce, not a distraction or impediment. So today, GreenSky delivers a service that helps businesses grow and delight their customers using our technology. So how important is QA at GreenSky? Well, we're providing a financial loan service. So making sure that's a high quality product to intake your personal information and then provide you with some financial services. We have pretty high standards here.
Yeah, and we also support multiple platforms, right? So we have, web-based, we have mobile, both being responsive on mobile browsers and in native applications as well. So we want to make sure we cover the full breadth of that service to ensure it all works.
Right. The fact that we deal with money and lending also adds some level of importance to making sure that things work. Otherwise, not only will we be in trouble, the customers will be too.
Yeah.
Right. So very important.
Great. Thank you all for that background there. So what are some common challenges that you've seen for teams just starting with automation?
So there's two main things I want to focus on when it comes to common challenges. The first one is when you start automation, you have to choose your testing platform, right? You can do a self-managed solution where you use a lot of open source products to get what you need to do done. This kind of gives you full control over the scope of your automation pipeline. But the fallback is that you have a long-term, or not long-term, it's a more difficult initial setup, and then maintenance is all on you, right? There's no one else to help. Conversely, there are options with third parties where you can use their product. We've tried that in the past, where they give you a quick setup period. It's almost like here's your automation in a box to get started, and then they help you with the maintenance of the ecosystem you're using, but that does make you dependent on that ecosystem and their tools. So if something ever goes down or something goes wrong, it's, you have to wait on them to kind of help you with those services. The second part that I think is the biggest hurdle is the early automation. So once you get it set up, you choose your platform, then you have to figure out that automation and application interaction. And at the beginning, you'll run into a few nuances to make sure you can get your end-to-end scenario completed, right? And then you'll have little things pop up along further down the road, but they won't be as big as when you first get that set up. A good example I like to tell people is around when we started mobile automation, about 5 years ago now, swiping was still very popular, like swiping to accept or swiping to unlock your phone. And in automation, that is a huge hurdle to get over because you're dealing with multiple devices, right? So different sizes of screens. Yeah, you can do smart objects, but that doesn't always work the way you want it to. So that's something where we had to kind of shift our approach in the future as how we did progression of screens. to kind of fit into that mold of automation so that we can actually progress through the app more easily and grow with the usability of the platform.
Thanks, Ryan.
That's great. Yeah, I think a lot of people have probably seen those challenges. So what was your reality like before test automation?
So before test automation, I'm going to kind of talk about whenever I first joined GreenSky, which was in 2014. There was limited automation in the group. So what that we did have was more focused on the UI, which we know is very heavy. Each test took almost 20 minutes, I would say, to run, and had very little ROI on even creating the test scripts. Our native mobile application was being manually tested for every release, which had a very high cost due to defects and resources and the multiple releases they had to go through because of the defects that would come out late in the game. So that realization, it was just not efficient and not sustainable for our process, occurred very rapidly to the whole team. And we moved away from that legacy setup of Selenium Java just from the front end side to more of a module hybrid model that worked best in a 3-tier automation framework supporting the DB API and limited UI tests. So inverting that ice cream cone pyramid type visualization, I think most of us have seen. Mason, what do you think?
Yeah. So not only this company, the last company I was at, like before we got underway with automation, I think automation helps bring order to things in general, whereas a lot of people have these kind of varying degrees of the way they like to do manual testing and things. I think automation not only helps with like your execution of getting things done quickly and on time and making sure stability stays, but at least in our case, I know our platform, like mobile, iOS, and Android, were quite different. And automation kind of encouraged those things to become more in parity, because not only did it help the team, but it helped us reduce the amount of code that we needed for automation. So that push not only cut down time on automation or on manual testing because we were automating, but because we actually made things more similar. It helped get us into a place where we're more streamlined.
Yeah, place of parity.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So it almost like standardized your processes as well.
Yes.
That's great. So how did test automation become the answer?
So really, when I started here, automation was just kind of getting off the ground. I know that with, especially in regard to mobile, I'll speak more to that because that's the platform I'm more familiar with. We'd already been integrating automation from our website, but once I swapped over to the mobile team, it really already wasn't a question of if we were going to do automation, but when, simply because the number of platforms we had to support is just not possible to be doing manual testing on regularly. So to ensure that like our basic functionality was not breaking, we were either going to have to spend a lot of money hiring more people, or a little bit of money and a little bit of extra time in getting our automation base set up so that we could ensure that different screen sizes and operating systems and the various different mini versions of Android that there have been, it just wasn't going to be possible to handle manually.
Yeah, and it helped with the case of risk as well, right? So we got to the point where we started releasing more often, more features started coming down the pipeline, we're growing as a company, and to Mason's point, we still need to account for all those different permutations of things when it comes to mobile devices, since it is a native application. So with these tight deadlines, you're able to say, okay, well, we have the base functionality, we talk about that a lot, of our automation in place. So in a time frame where, okay, when you get this quick release out, usually you would only be able to focus on that feature. But because we do have automation, we can ensure that, okay, well, we have this extra stuff we can test while we're testing through the automation. That gives us a better sense of risk, right? So we know we're not breaking whatever's out there. So if there's ever a case where you need to roll back something like that, it'll be easy and simple to do. And you have that reassurance. And that only grows, right? Because naturally your product grows with more functionality, and then your manual tests will grow with it. And your automation starts to encompass more of the what we call regression. So it's a great thing to have as a safety net.
yeah, I know when you're scaling, that can be very helpful. Oh, this is an interesting question. All right, so I know a lot of people find it difficult sometimes to fit automation into their software development lifecycle. How and when do they do it? So can you talk a little bit more about the process you found for including automation in your overall QA approach?
So the overall QA approach, to take just a look at that, the first thing we always want to look at, if it's manual or automated, is to focus on the user experience. Testing at all levels of the project is crucial, but the most important thing to do is to include, how this affects the users. So we want to make sure we keep that in the forefront of our minds. So you always want to set your automation goals. You cannot and should not automate anything on everything that you have on your list, but you want to focus on things that have a high ROI. What's critical from the business point of view? Does it carry a high risk of failure? Has it been executed repeatedly? Does it involve large data sets? Does the test need to be run on different browsers, environments, devices, operating systems? Can it be executed manually or take a lot of time? Does it result in a clear pass-fail result? Does it check for stable features? And does it need to be told exactly what to do? So when we look at that for a test approach, we're looking for that set of guidelines when writing or running the test. Because we want to make sure we focus on 5 main approaches to automation to determine how the tests are carried out. So we're looking for linear, module-based test library architecture, data-driven tests, and hybrid models, which is probably the most popular. And that's definitely what we use as a hybrid approach, because there isn't one set canned automation framework that works for anyone, I don't think.
Yeah. As far as where automation is needed versus where you can still do manual, I have 2 good examples of that. So we have the ability to scan driver's license. And usually that's easier with a physical device. There are hoops you could jump through to do a automation solution, but that's a good example of a place where you wouldn't do it, because just the speed of being able to grab it, you have your in-house suite, grab a device, grab a license, or grab the list of licenses, barcodes you have, and then scan them is just going to be faster no matter what you do. Another good example is signatures. So you can do signatures on a device, but as I told you earlier, like in our life cycle, where we were trying to do a lot of swipe-based functionality, that's kind of the same thing, right? You're swiping around the screen to do signatures, and devices based on sizes can handle that differently. So for us, it's just easier to do signatures on the manual side of testing. So we know to kind of keep things like that in a different pool, and then to focus on things that actually give us value.
So if you're looking at selecting a tool, you've got to take all of these things into account. So it's what is your system? What language is it written on? What are you trying to accomplish with it? To make sure you get the right tool, not just any tool. Because a lot of people reach out and it's like, oh, Selenium, it's the thing that's out there. It's free. Yeah. Let me pick this and run with it because someone said it's great. Or I've seen people do the same thing with things like Cucumber. Oh, I'm going to do BDD. I'm going to select Cucumber. Should be super easy, right? So there's a lot of work that goes into setting these frameworks up. You have to have a very clear understanding of each one. So you absolutely have to do the research on them and make sure it's the right fit for your system and the engineers you have working on them. Because early on, we also implemented, when we moved away from Selenium Java, we moved over to a BDD framework. So it was using Jasmine, which is a type of JavaScript, running off the back end of Selenium. And we tried to use that across the board, but it required people to learn a different type of language and increase skill sets. But then we had to switch over to Mocha libraries for mobile to work with it. And it's a constant change to where now we're using Kobiton and
yeah. We tried a lot of different things to start out. And, as you grow with your automation in general, as far as what's available to you, is also going to change and grow, right? And that's something we experienced from day one to now, to all the points that Crystal mentioned. Right.
Yeah, and it's not just about testing your apps. You still got to look at things like system integration testing and part of regression. You have to factor those type of things into your automation. I would even suggest including things, if you're on large systems, you're looking at logs, error handling. Could you automate all of those things and get a proper ROI on it instead of doing constant manual checks? It's just a normal part of regression from that point, right?
Yeah, environments as well.
All the environments you may go through. So if you're in the world of continuous integration and delivery, it's not that, that much of a problem as it is if you're in some of the legacy environments to where you're going from a dev to a QA, staging, UAT, or whatever your environment might be. That imposes another level of complexity to think through.
Yeah. I will say that adds perhaps an unintended value to our automation as well. As so many times, if a service does go down, we should theoretically have somebody else checking that, and that should come back up elsewhere. But there's a lot of times where before we start testing, we have our automated stuff running, on cron jobs or triggered based off of builds. Mm-hmm. And we'll find out that something is broken before we even start testing, and that helps us hop in and hopefully get that fixed and saves us time there as well.
So a lot of you have probably seen the quadrant agile testing model, where you have your automated test for technology-facing things, your automated test as far as it goes for performance and load testing, memory management, security, maintainability, and to make sure things are scalable, right? And then you have something that's going to be a little bit more on the hybrid side where it's automated and manual for test case creation on stories and verifications and things that need to get into the framework later on. Exploratory scenarios that you might get from your business to include later on. Those are proper candidates for automation in a later release, because once it's released, it can then become part of regression. So all of those are factored into what we look at as an overall QA approach.
Great, that was a good list of criteria. Thank you. So what metrics did you find provided the best insights during this ramp?
So we looked at our manual test cases. How many of them do we run? How often do we run them? Going through some of that criteria that we spoke to before. What made sense to automate? So we looked at the counts. What test suites did we always go through?
Yeah, I have a good example of that. So before you log into the mobile application, you have options like forgetting your PIN, forgot username to give you reminders on that, registering yourself as a new user, and logging into the application. These at the beginning, in general, are the scenarios we ran the most, right? Because people are constantly forgetting their PIN, and that's just something that happens. So when we created our first suite was to get everything before you log in done, since that's where the majority of our users spend their most time. So, and that it's been saving us so much time now, because I can't remember the last time we ran those manually. To think of it, it's been years at this point.
Yeah.
So yeah, things like that is where you want to focus, especially at the start.
Yeah, and all of your cross-browser tests, operating systems, devices, you just want to have all of those repeatable items put over, and those are awesome metrics to look at. So, if you've got 20 tests in a suite that's going to get run across 10 different browser device flavors, right, that's a huge ROI on being able to automate that and just have it run, whether it runs during the day while someone else is running other tests or at night. And getting those pass fails back at the next day is awesome as well.
Yeah, another one is like, a good thought is, what is the core of your business, right? So for us on the mobile application, if everything was to not work, the main thing we want to work is that you can submit an application, right? So that's another thing that says, okay, that's one of the most important things our app can do. Let's see if we can automate that, right? Because that's supposed to always be working. So if that's not working, you halt everything and make sure that that's fixed again. So, repeatable things, and then the most important things to your business as well.
Yeah. So a general rule in the spirit of metrics for automation, if I cannot run something more than twice, I don't see an ROI in automating it. The cost to automate it at that point is far greater from resources to do the job than you would get on actually running the automation. So that's one of the biggest metrics that we use.
Great, thanks. So overall, what's the value that you've gained from test automation, would you say?
Peace of mind.
Yeah.
That's a great one.
Right.
It's kind of a culmination of everything we talked about today, is that, you get to, it's an efficiency thing, right? Very early on, automation was always represented as a luxury. And I think to some point it is, because you got to make sure you always have that fallback of the manual scenarios if you ever have to go back to them. But it does provide an additional view to, like, okay, how do we manage risk? How do you manage releases, right? So as you're running your automation, as you're testing, use that feedback, take it back to the business. So then when they come to you with, hey, we want to put out this thing, or we want to add this new feature, you can say, okay, well, we know we can, knock that out super fast. So maybe you can put a second feature in, because we know we can test it very quickly. And that gives you more value, right, on the business side. And it's easy to represent that when you have the metrics behind you as well.
And after you meet that point in your automation journey, it just becomes an organic part of your way of life. It's no longer, what do I gain from automation? It's just how we test now, and how we look at each effort as it comes up.
That's awesome. Thank you. Well, anybody in the audience, if you have a question for our three speakers, please ask it now. In the meantime, here, we've already got one. When do you do maintenance? Is that part of your sprint?
So our sprints, so we have two different styles. We have 2-week sprints for a lot of our teams. Our mobile team runs a little bit differently. So I'll talk about the other teams. Yeah. Their maintenance, they are supposed to include in their sprint. Yes, absolutely. Because if you do not, it then becomes tech debt. So we don't want to introduce the tech debt during the sprint just to get a new initiative out. And then for the mobile team, I'll let the guys.
Yeah, for the mobile team, we lag by a sprint. So essentially, we focus on that sprint, everything encompassing it. We focus on the manual aspects of that sprint. Then as we move on to the next functionality for the next sprint, for the manual or for the automation side, we go look at the previous one and say, okay, what new stuff from here can we automate? And then what old stuff needs to be repaired as we go into the next one. So it's like one step behind.
Right. Well, and especially for us, because mobile stuff changes so often. Yeah. Theoretically, after we've waited a sprint, it should be set in concrete, at least until the next change. But lagging behind by sprint for us helps a lot, not only in making sure that we understand fully how it's going to work, but also that's not going to change.
Yeah.
And a lot of this is rooted in scope of interaction as well, because, for instance, for iOS, there are a lot of dependencies when it comes to running your automation against Apple devices. So if you have a new OS like OS, when iOS 9 came out, I'll never forget that. That was a big change with Swift and everything being introduced, right? And the tools or the requirements you needed to run your automation against it, the kind of overlap with the sprint where we were trying to do something like something big and release that. It's those kind of things that can hinder us if we were doing it in real time. So that's why we take the lag step and we represent that as we plan, so that everybody's on the same page and it fits.
Yeah. So when you're automating a native mobile application, that's one of our prime products. It does change often. It changes often as a web UI might. So it's actually more profitable in automation to do it that way for the mobile team. To where some of the other teams who are focused on database components or API changes, those are a little more rapid and change far less. They do those during the sprint to cut down on the tech debt, because their next sprint's going to be full of more functional changes. So there's not a time to do that backfill as we do with the native app. I hope that answered the question.
I think so. Thanks for that explanation. We've got another question here for you. This person says, at the beginning, Ryan talked about deciding on a tool, open source with high level of effort up front versus a third-party tool. Which way did you decide to go and why?
So at the beginning, we attempted the Appium Selenium solution. But at that point, it was only 3 people on the team. It was myself, we had an Android developer and an iOS developer. So we still need manual cases, right? We were moving very quickly. We just, that was version 1 of the mobile application. We were trying to get up and going. So the time wasn't really there. So what we ended up doing was switching to a third party. where they kind of gave us the box of stuff. It's like, here you go. It allowed me to spin things up very quickly. If there was ever issues, I could reach out to them to help us. So it's like a helping hand. And then as we grew and Mason came on, we were able to go back to that solution and to flesh it out the way we wanted to have, like the previous question mentioned, to have that room for maintenance and the personnel for that.
Yeah, I mean, when I came on, we were working with a different product at the time, which, like you said before, kind of was an all-in-one solution, which on the surface theoretically was great. It worked for smaller bits. Yeah. But as we put more and more load on it, longer tests, more suites, attempting to run it on more devices, it just kind of began to fall apart under the pressure we were putting on it. So at that point, it really just became a lot of reading and testing and trial runs on various different surfaces. I know we did personally settle on Kobiton, which you can find a lot of platforms that do similar things. I think the biggest reason for us why it worked so well is that we did eventually decide to go back with the Appium, which has been fantastic for us so far. That at least allows you to be somewhat platform agnostic. You're not tied to any particular platform. It allows us to run stuff locally if we need to. But what's most important if you're looking for like a cloud service provider or anything like that, you want to find one that has really good support because especially in our trial period and in our previous products, communications would get lost. They would tell us once maintenance was over and we lost a day of testing, we'd find those things out. But so if you at all have the ability, make sure you give some good trial periods in there because you want to really know how well this company is going to be able to support you and your company. Communication is very important. Sustainability and like uptime are things that we really put in high priority, and Kobiton was very good about that. So.
And to put a little more perspective, now we have 3 automation resources, right? So we're able to juggle at the speed we're doing now, like 2-week releases. We're able to juggle our automation and manual stuff while keeping the high quality, and that's something that's definitely different from when we started, which allows us to do the process we have now.
Some good advice, thank you. And actually, Ryan, what you said at the end kind of leads into our next question here. This person wants to know, you mentioned that you have some manual testing that is better to not automate. Do you manual test those items in every release in production?
Oh, no. So I'm a big advocate of target regressions and target testing, right? Because that's going to, like, our application is huge, right? If you think about it, we have different routes you can take to submit an app for different, areas, healthcare, home improvement. And what makes mobile kind of special is that you can do it all through the mobile app. Whereas on website, it's more focused on those specific areas. So when we have releases, we're not changing all the functionality all the time, right? And this is a good place to mention code reviews and having testers that have the ability to look at, dev code and see exactly how it works, because that helps you manage your risk and manage your focus when you test. So if we were to change, let's say, logging into an application, right? We don't have to test submitting apps. We don't have to test changing your password. We really care about the logging because that's what was changed. And when you do the code reviews through the process and you keep that dialogue with your devs, you're able to say, okay, well, we can ignore any automation outside of that area and then focus on getting that test. And that gives you speed, right? That gives you a low risk and that gives you quicker to market. Like that's a good way to look at it.
Hey guys, it's Drew with Kobiton. Can you hear me?
Hey, Drew, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Awesome. I can hear you. It does look like Beth has dropped off, likely due to a network issue. So I'll go ahead and read the remaining questions that we have in the box. Okay. Let's see here. So first one is, what do you suggest for non-code-based automation testing?
Non-code-based automation testing.
As in, are they asking for, I assume they're asking for a tool that is
like a
non-programmer friendly.
A plug-and-play tool. So Selenium used to have a tool to where you could do recording, but that's all front-end web. There are several tools out there that allow you to do some of that plug and play. I'm trying to remember the ones that we just went through.
There are a lot of experimental tools that are going through like AI stuff to assist with not only you'll run through it once, then it'll be able to iterate on that. Drew, I don't know. I don't remember. I feel like you guys may have been working on some tools like that. I don't know if I remember you talking to us about it. If you have anything to pitch, now's a good time to do that.
Yeah, no, that's actually a fantastic segue. As a matter of fact, we are releasing a new product in Q1 of this year. It's currently in beta. We're calling it Intelligent Test Automation. The idea is that you would be able to come in and run a single exploratory manual test on one of our devices, and we'll convert that into an Appium script and then execute that against any number of devices that you stipulate, in addition to being able to export that Appium script for your use with any other platform or emulator or simulator. So definitely something on the horizon near term. I would say if you're interested, reach out to us at marketing@kobiton.com to get involved in the beta. Otherwise, it will be available for the general public in January.
Okay, good. I didn't call you out on that, right? You were ready to announce that, right?
It's a secret, Mason.
Okay. So, Kobiton has an excellent platform. All the ones that I've seen outside of, testing for mobile, it's just Selenium running in the back end that someone's put a UI in front of it to make it easier. So we prefer to go the engineer route. So I'm sorry I couldn't recommend a tool that I've actually used to handle that for you.
Awesome. Okay, next question is, how do you ensure quality on the automation scripts?
We do code reviews. We follow and practice standards for our coding process, not just writing the scripts themselves, just like a developer would when they're coding for the application.
Yeah, I can speak to that as well. So all three of us on the mobile team could run you through either our iOS or Android code and pretty much tell you how it works, right? Because we've seen it so much, and we do it to the story level. So when we get an initiative from the business, they start developing it. After they develop it, before they even merge the code and we begin testing, we do the code reviews like Crystal mentioned, and they have to show us the behavior, what changed, what it used to be, and then kind of explain why they're implementing it that certain way. And we even also take part in the code brainstorming. So when they decide how they want to do something, we're in those meetings as well. So I think that all says that from the testing standpoint, if your testers can be as involved as your developers as far as implementing your functionality, it's going to make the testing better, right? Because you'll catch little nuances that you wouldn't catch otherwise as you're writing your test and doing your exploratory stuff. So yeah,
that's really safe.
Code reviews are huge.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks for that. Next question. Why was Appium your final choice for mobile automation?
Oh goodness. I guess the biggest reason being that it does have a lot of support for it, but outside of that, the fact that again it's something that we're rooting for Kobiton, hope they do well, but if they ever went under, we could still keep using our automation. Yeah. We could port it to another service if we needed to. But most importantly, the fact that we can maintain it locally, again, support's just huge. There's people out everywhere using using Appium right now, so it makes it a lot easier if you run into a problem. Somebody's probably asked the question and found a solution by now, for the most part.
Yeah, it's efficient and has a great support base.
Yeah.
Awesome. And hopefully you won't be leaving us anytime soon.
That's why we keep asking you for the roadmap, Drew. We're ready for the next day Kobiton thing.
We're overdue for a call. Okay, next question. You mentioned that you have some manual testing that is better to not automate. Do you manually test those items in every release in production?
We answered that one.
Yeah, I think we answered that one.
Yeah, it's a rehash.
Okay.
Did it come later? Do we need to do kind of a recap for someone that joined late, maybe?
Perhaps just a quick overview.
Yeah, so real quick, the answer is really no. You like to do a focused approach to anything. If you're doing a big release where you're touching a lot of parts of your system, yes, just run your whole suite and allocate the time for that. But if it's specific to one page or one functionality, if you're adding some text, make sure that your matching matches the effort, right? And that's going to help you get to market faster while keeping your risk super low.
Awesome. Okay. That appears to be all the questions that I'm able to see. So unless Beth hops on in the next 30 seconds, I think it's safe to go ahead and wrap it up. Just want to say thank you to everyone from the GreenSky team, Crystal, Mason, Ryan. Thank you also to TechWell for helping us put this on, and also thank you to everyone who's attended this webinar.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, have a great day, everyone.
Is there potential,
Sure.
if anyone has questions that they perhaps didn't get on here, that they could email and you could send those to us to answer later?
Yeah, absolutely. So if there are any questions that weren't able to be mentioned here, please feel free to shoot those over to marketing@kobiton.com, and I'll make sure to get those over to the GreenSky team and get back to you as soon as possible.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Have a great day, guys. Bye.